Hello, Sanu Hujambo Salam. I'm Thembekile Mrototo, and this is Unwrap Africa, where we focus every week on the latest news, trends, and successes of the African continent. Siyaqhaqha. And here's what we want to know from you tonight. What's your take on the legal battle that's currently going on in South African courts between the government of Zambia and the family of the late former president Edgar Lungu? They're currently fighting over the right to bury him and where he should be laid to rest 3 months after his death. Send us your comments or voice notes, in fact, via WhatsApp. The number is +27 78459 1897. That's +27 78459 1897. You can also find us on Facebook, SABC Unwrap Africa, and on X, our handle is SABC News_TV. Let's have a look at the biggest news stories from the continent this week. The late Nelson Mandela's grandson has sailed with a large civilian convoy in a bid to break the Israeli blockade over Gaza and deliver much-needed aid to a population that is under siege. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has launched a campaign for a 2027-28 UN Security Council seat, backed by SADC, the African Union, and key international partners. Ghana has received deportees from the United States to help facilitate their return to home countries amid rising regional tensions. And the Africa Summit has called for renewable energy boosts, critical mineral coalitions, as well as global climate financing ahead of the COP30 gathering. And at 85, Malawi's former president Peter Mutharika has launched a bid to return to power amid health and leadership concerns. The vote will happen on the 16th of September. In Ethiopia, authorities have officially inaugurated Africa's largest hydroelectric dam. The massive project is set to provide energy to millions of Ethiopians while deepening a rift, though, downstream with Egypt that has unsettled the region. The dam has been a source of tension between the Egyptians, the Sudanese, as well, who are concerned about water security since the water facility is located next to the Nile River. Thembekile reports.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the dam was built to prosper, electrify the entire region, change the history of black people, and absolutely not to harm its brothers. The Ethiopian leader says Addis Ababa will use the energy to improve Ethiopians' access to electricity and export surplus power to the region. They see the $5 billion Grand Renaissance Dam as central to their economic ambitions. The dam's power has gradually increased since the first turbine was turned on in 2022, reaching its maximum capacity of 5,000 megawatts today. That puts it amongst the 20 biggest hydroelectric dams in the world.
Ethiopia built the Renaissance Dam to prosper and to enlighten the region, never to hurt its brothers. I would like to confirm to you in front of the Ethiopian people that we will never retain your fair share of the water at any point.
This project was part of a concerted effort by Ethiopia to cement its position as a hydroelectronic powerhouse in Africa. The Horn of Africa will benefit.
We are ready to sign a power purchase agreement so that we can offtake some of the power from this important dam. Reliability is especially critical for special economic zones, industrial parks, ICT hubs, and agro-processing facilities, all of which require consistent and affordable power to drive Kenya's development agenda.
Now the continent is waiting for the DRC to also make progress on the construction of the Inga Dam. It has the potential to generate power that can electrify the whole continent. Thembekile, SABC News.
South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has suspended the first vice president and the leader of the largest opposition group in the country, Dr. Riek Machar. The suspension came hours after the government had announced that Machar would be tried. He has been under house arrest since March without trial and is now going to face charges of murder, treason, crimes against humanity and financing terrorism. The SABC's Patrick Oyet has this update.
The suspension of Riek Machar from the position of first vice president is meant to allow prosecution to arraign him on the charges leveled against him and his other party members. South Sudan's law blocks prosecution of senior government officials, so it is only now that Mr. Machar is suspended from the government that he can be taken to court. The charges against him stem from an attack on a military base in Nasir in the north in March. The attack was carried out by a militia known as White Army that is affiliated to Mr. Machar's armed opposition group. The government says 250 soldiers were killed in that attack. A UN helicopter was shot at during a rescue operation and a pilot was killed. The Justice Ministry says 7 of Machar's allies, including a petroleum minister and army deputy chief of staff, are also charged. It says other 13 suspects remained at large. The government says a total of 83 people were interrogated during the investigation. It says many people were released due to insufficient evidence and that it is now moving to formally charge Mr. Machar and his co-accused. Patrick Oyet for Unwrap Africa.
So Namibia is close to an economic boom that could transform the country in the years to come. The discovery of oil as well as gas have triggered significant levels of investment, with locals in all sectors likely to benefit. It will also finance the development of infrastructure and potentially a sovereign wealth fund for the country, which has had an impact, a rather positive one, they say, in countries like Norway. SABC News reporter Nosipho Khatebe has more for you.
In Namibia, it's about people and possibilities. The country boasts a favorable political and economic climate with a sparse population. And unlike South Africa, where legal challenges hinder exploration, Namibia offers a more flexible environment for investors. But citizens don't just want good policies, but also implementation and local capabilities, especially where energy security is concerned.
I think in a country like Namibia, when opportunities do arise, sometimes those that get into the industry first might benefit more than the ones that haven't yet.
On the aspect that they're providing bursaries and study opportunities, I think it's a very good insight. It's a market that hasn't been tapped in.
I believe the only concern as a nation that would have is that the oil and gas opportunity would not be available for everyone and only a selected few.
There's a potential to create a lot of jobs, especially for our economy, and a lot of global attention is being drawn to Namibia due to the potential of it being a very big and lucrative player in the global market.
Opportunities, when it comes down to that, it should involve the locals, I feel, the locally based individuals of Namibia. So they should be informed about the developments around these projects. They should be upskilled.
The country's energy sector has long faced challenges, high costs and unreliable access, and even though the region has abundant renewable energy resources, it remains heavily reliant on imports. Namibia is also known for its renowned high-quality and free-range meat industry, which is key to the country's agricultural sector, with export markets like the EU, US and China. But its drivers aren't exactly happy with its performance, as they are struggling for capital to boost exports.
Currently, we are only focused in EU and Norway. The only reason is we just don't have enough stock to really export to more markets or even look for more customers.
It is this reason some of the citizens in the country have decided to explore oil and gas to pivot to green energy. This is their attempt to mitigate the challenges the youth and businesses here face.
The plan really around the Hyphen Hydrogen project is to build plus approximately 7 gigawatt solar and wind renewable energy project in the Thembekile National Park, of which will set up about a 3.2 gigawatt electrolyzer to produce about 370,000 tons of green hydrogen annually.
Namibia will need strong governance to avoid corruption and mismanagement, policies to ensure local jobs and contracts for Namibians, environmental oversight so oil extraction doesn't harm communities or ecosystems.
So once you have sort of a discovery made, it needs to be appraised to see if it's commercially viable, yeah? And then once that appraisal is done, it goes into development. So what that means for the economy currently during the appraisal phase is that you have direct employment on the offshore drilling rigs when the appraising or the appraisal stage is active.
Recently, Nedbank CEO Jason Quinn and Terence Sibia, the group's head of Africa regions, met with Namibian government officials to reaffirm the lender's commitment to the oil and gas-rich country.
Looking at sector coverage much more deliberately in sectors such as agriculture, mining and resources, logistics, energy. And we're really investing in that, but also investing heavily in technology. We set aside over the last few years just about 11 billion rand to invest in upgrading our core. I know you haven't seen all of that yet in Namibia, and I can promise you it's on the way.
All eyes will be on how Namibia manages expectations, prepares its people, and turns discovery into development. Nosipho Khatebe, SABC News, Windhoek.
Let's go back to our question of the day. We asked you earlier what your thoughts are tonight on the legal battle between the family of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu and the government. They've been fighting for about 3 months over rights to bury him and where he should actually be laid to rest. Let's look at the comments that have come in so far. One here says that he belongs in Zambia. Leaders face their people, even in death, no excuses. Black and Gamla says that it's very nonsensical. There's no person who, under any circumstances, be buried in a foreign country. We had enough of activists buried in foreign lands. Sarah Bartman and King Hinza's head. No more. He should be buried in his home country. Sifularo Mwasa says that our constitution must be respected. It should be interpreted and applied without fear or favor. With the right legal counsel, the family's wishes would prevail. The Bill of Rights would ensure it happens. And another one here says that the family does not want his body to return for a presidential burial. They stole billions of dollars from the Zambian people, allegedly. They fear backlash for attending the state funeral. They hid the identity of the president while in South Africa. How corrupt. So the African continent is a continent of more than 1 billion people. Majority of them are women. But the media industry, like other sectors of the employment space, is lagging behind when it comes to gender parity. Equality remains a problem in Africa's newsrooms. And we're fortunate enough today to speak to someone who has dedicated her time in the industry to basically champion and advocate for equality and the rights of women in the media industry. We're joined by Dr. Yemisi Akinbobola. Good to have you on Unwrap Africa, ma'am. Thank you so much for making time to talk to us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back in Joburg.
And it's a pleasure for us to have you here. And, you know, I made reference to the issue of gender equality in the media space. From your reading, where do things stand across Africa? I know that's a bit of a generalization on a continent of 54 nations, but here we are.
No, I mean, it's not a generalization because I've done a lot of research across the continent, individual countries, but also continent-wide research on this very issue. And the experiences are pretty much the same. There's some nuances here and there, but it's largely the same. So top issues are issues around sexual harassment, both internal within organizations, but then also external with sources, etc. And you know, technology facilitated gender-based violence is a huge thing, right? And also things around the gender pay gap and opportunities for progression and leadership for women in media. So, for example, when you talk about the gender pay gap, is often in the context of I have a colleague, a male colleague, who is on the same level as me but earning more. That happens. What also happens is the opportunity that women, the limited opportunity that women have to do things and engage in conferences, events, training, report on certain issues that facilitates that progression, right? So upon entering into the industry, a lot of women are encouraged towards what they call more social issues.
The human interest stories, as they call them.
Exactly. And kind of discouraged from the politics and the business. Those kind of news that we know are the bread and butter of media, right? That get you that progression. Same thing with training opportunities, etc. So when you have those limited opportunities, right? And the disenfranchisement of women in those opportunities, that also contributes to a large gender pay gap, right? So, and then also there's the issue of how many women do we see at the top of media? How many women do we see owning media? And, you know, those challenges do come from external, but they're also very much internal. I think media, as an industry, we need to get better at. I know we don't like to be the subject of the story, but actually in this case, this is really important.
I was actually going to say it's interesting because as the media, we shine the light on inequality in other spaces, yet there's a reluctance, an awkwardness that comes with dealing with the issues internally.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us in terms of reshaping the industry, and who takes up the responsibility to do so?
Yeah, and you know, when we talk about responsibility, the onus is often on the women to sort themselves out, you know. And oftentimes women do not report cases of sexual violence or sexual harassment in the line of their work. Oftentimes they do not negotiate the salaries or discuss money in that context. Oftentimes your familial status is used against you. You're kind of damned if you have a family and children, but you're also damned if you don't, you know, that kind of thing. And so there is that question of responsibility, and I think it must be, in terms of whose responsibility it is, it must be a multi-stakeholder approach. It must be the organizations, it must be the regulators, it must be the ombudsman, the councils, and the unions, and us as well, right? So but the critical thing is, without enough awareness, without the organizations themselves realizing that this is an issue, or even knowing that it's an issue, it's not gonna.
Do they not know though, or do they shy away from it because of that awkwardness that I referenced?
I think there's a combination of that, but there's a normalization. There are a lot of things in our industry with women journalists that are normalized, and therefore, so I'll give you an example. When I did research on the lived experience of women in Rwanda, for example, and presented this research to media leaders, they were shocked. And I'm thinking, how can you be shocked? Because they were so, they really did not feel that this was just not something that they knew. And then also you have those instances where it's a pushback. So imagine telling a room full of 15 male media managers that, you know, the top issues that women journalists in your country is facing sexual harassment. The response is always like, but they're the one harassing us. We also get sexually harassed. But that's not the point, right? That kind of zero-sum kind of...
Because it's not equal, it's not happening on an even scale.
Exactly. So there is, you know, and I just concluded research in Ethiopia, and very importantly, a lot of my participants said, you know, I really wonder whether our bosses understand the consequences of these things for us, you know, and I think that's a key issue. There is an element of awareness. There is an element where they are aware, and maybe they do even have gender policies, but there is no will to do it. And that brings me to another point of, oftentimes you're asked to make the business case to tackle these things. You know, the business case to have women, because beyond women in media, working in the media, there's also the perspectives of women in media content. Right. So my organization, for a number of years, we've been doing media fellowships where we commission women journalists to report on the gender angle of global issues. And we have a lot of media partners that we publish. And so we held like a little mini focus group with these editors and said, do you want us to continue this? And a lot of them said, oh yes, please continue, because we do not have a budget to focus on gender issues.
So are you expected to work for free?
You know, but the point is, when you are reporting on climate issues, there should be a perspective about women's experiences. There is there's a responsibility that organization must take, both internally in terms of looking at itself and critiquing itself when it comes to gender equality. And of course, I've been talking about women, but there's so many intersectional identities that come into that: gender and race, sexuality, ethnicity, religion, age. And when you add those dynamics, it's even worse for women.
So what then becomes the way forward? Are there examples in other parts of the world that perhaps African nations could look to in terms of how to get gender equality in the newsroom and at a representation perspective based on what we put out, how to get all of that right?
Obviously, we had the BBC that did the 50-50 program that they did, project that they did a while back with the view to address gender inequality. But I think, you know, there is the solutions within the media industry, but there's also kind of more policy level solutions. So for example, I think it's Norway and Finland, or one of them, that now have a national policy that mandates that at least, I think, 40% of board members of any organization of a certain size must be women. Once you have that, you cannot then ignore it within your organization. So I think there needs to be that kind of macro level intervention as well within the industry. When we start talking about press freedom and the way these kind of laws can then be weaponized, that's another issue. But it does not mean that we shouldn't take those kind of necessary policy level actions. And I think awareness is one thing, policies is another, and then finally is the will to make that change.
Dr. Yemisi Akinbobola, good to talk to you. Thank you so much for being on Unwrap Africa.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's all. We'll leave our conversation with Dr. Yemisi Akinbobola here on Unwrap Africa, looking at gender equality in the African newsroom. Welcome back to Unwrap Africa. So we've been asking you tonight for your thoughts on the legal battle between the family of the former Zambian President Edgar Lungu and the government there. Burial rights seem to be the issue. In fact, not seem to be, where should he be buried and who has the right to make that decision is the question 3 months after Lungu died in South Africa. And some of your thoughts still coming in. Let's see what people are saying. The Zambian government must respect the family's wishes. If a family wants a private funeral, the state should just respect that choice and give the former president a state memorial service like South Africa did with former President de Klerk. Victor says, I think the government of Zambia is now embarrassing itself by fighting over a dead body. Let sleeping dogs lie, no pun intended. Mandela says, it's Mubango all over again. This is the case of life imitating art. Ghost says they should let the big guy sleep in peace in South Africa. Is in Africa and the person belongs to his family. They'd rather hold their gun salutes in Zambia and honor him, not fight for his repatriation. So that's just how the sentiment is looking from you tonight regarding the burial battle around Edgar Lungu. Where should he be laid to rest? Here in South Africa or back home in Zambia? Well, a South African court is due to make that decision in the coming weeks. So Enkutatesh marks the beginning of the Ethiopian calendar. It symbolizes renewal as well as hope. Bizuayehu, Mekuria and Maema Morake have been sharing the richness of the celebration as they sat down this week to enjoy traditional Ethiopian coffee and delicacies like injera and doro.
Welcome, Addis Ahmed. That's what was said all around the world as Ethiopians welcomed their new year. Bays and her brothers are here to tell me all about their celebrations. Tell me about the celebration that you guys had this week.
Thank you. It was our new year on Thursday, which means September 11th. So we are in 2018 now. You know, when it's a new year, it's like it's a change in a life, even if you are not in home back in Ethiopia. So you feel wherever you are, there's a few community like Ethiopian community. We call actually we don't only call Ethiopians. We call each and every like from different countries just to see our New Year celebrating. To all my beautiful Ethiopian sister and brother, Melkam Baal.
Newness for me, from an African perspective, is also important, and we need to celebrate and acknowledge and enjoy it and celebrate it. I am a Mosotho. My New Year as a Mosotho happened on the 23rd, the first full new moon in August. What the beauty of this experience for me and my beautiful brothers and sisters here is that as we're eating injera and all of this wonderful Ethiopian food, the Ethiopians had their New Year's on the 11th of September. So my New Year's as a Mosotho man, and their New Year's and your New Year's as Ngunis falls right, theirs falls right in the middle of ours. So we're all actually as Africans celebrating newness on different days, but we identify all of these dates as days of newness. So this is a magical experience for newness as Africans.
እንኳን ለ2018 ዓመተ ምህረት በሰላም አደረሳችሁ።
And with that, a happy new year to all Ethiopian people watching Unwrap Africa. We'll leave it here for this edition of the program. Back with you 8 p.m. next week on SABC News. Bye-bye.